The Omega tried to leave quietly, but the Alpha's wolf marked her as his forever mate. The night air was cold, sharp enough to make Lyra shiver as she pressed herself against the edge of the dark forest. Mist rolled over the ground, curling around the roots of ancient trees like living fingers. She could hear the distant howl of wolves, a haunting sound that reminded her why she could never truly escape. Her heart pounded, not just from fear, but from the knowledge that she was being hunted, even if she did not yet know by whom. Lyra had always been different. From a young age, she had felt the emotions of others as if they were her own. Happiness, anger, longing, despair. She could sense it all, swirling around people like invisible currents. It was a gift she never wanted, a power that marked her as special but dangerous. And in the world of wolves, Alpha and Omega, of clans and ancient rules, it was a mark that drew attention. She tightened her cloak around her shoulders and ran, her boots muffled by the thick moss that carpeted the forest floor. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves made her heart jump. The villagers had warned her never to wander near the northern edge of the forest. Wolves were creatures of power, and the Alpha was said to be merciless, a shadow with eyes like amber fire. But she had nowhere else to go. She had to leave quietly, to vanish from a life that seemed already decided for her. The wind shifted suddenly, and Lyra froze. There was a presence behind her, something vast, heavy, alive. She sensed it before she saw it, a pulse of energy, deep and commanding. Her chest tightened as fear prickled along her spine. She could feel it in the marrow of her bones, a pull that made her want to run, yet kept her rooted to the spot. "Lyra!" The voice was low, calm, yet carried an edge that made her shiver. She turned, and her eyes met a figure stepping out of the shadows. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with hair as dark as the forest at midnight. But it was his eyes that froze her completely. Golden, glowing faintly like sunlight caught in amber, sharp and penetrating. The Alpha, Kale. He did not move closer immediately. He simply watched, as if weighing her soul. Lyra felt her stomach twist with a mixture of fear and an inexplicable fascination. His presence was overwhelming, and she realized with sudden clarity that the legends were true. He was not just a man and not just a wolf. He was power made flesh, and it drew her in despite herself. "I told you to leave," he said, voice smooth as velvet, yet carrying authority that brooked no argument. "I am leaving," Lyra whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "I do not want trouble." Kale's lips curved into a faint, almost cruel smile. "Trouble?" His voice deepened. "Do you think you can leave so easily?" He stepped closer, and Lyra instinctively took a step back. The air around him seemed to ripple, heavy and alive. "I can feel you, Lyra! I have felt you before you even set foot in this forest!" Lyra's pulse quickened. Her gift flared, a wave of sensations that should not have been possible. She felt his emotions, strength, desire, possessiveness, and something softer, almost lonely. She wanted to flee, but her feet refused to move. Something inside her recognized him in ways she could not explain. "Stay away from me," she whispered, her voice firmer now. "I will not be marked." "I will not belong to anyone!" Kale's expression darkened. He crouched slightly, his movements fluid and predatory. "Marked?" he asked, almost amused. Then, his eyes softened for a fraction of a second. "Lyra, it has already happened. You do not choose this. The bond, it chooses you." Lyra's heart skipped a beat. She shook her head, confusion and panic rising. "I don't understand." "The wolf within me has claimed you," he said, voice low, almost a growl. "Your fate is tied to mine now. You are my Omega whether you accept it or not." Her instinct screamed to run, to hide, to fight against what she could not fully comprehend. She could sense the bond forming, subtle but undeniable, a pull in her chest that mirrored the pull in his. She was being drawn to him whether she wanted it or not. "I won't belong to anyone," she whispered again, tears prickling her eyes. Kale stepped even closer, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. "You do not know what it means to be mine," he said softly. "It is not only desire or power. It is protection. It is fire and shadow. You may fear it now, but in time—" He paused, studying her face. "You may understand." Lyra felt the weight of his words pressing against her heart. She wanted to resist, but even as she shook her head, she realized that every instinct she had, every gift she carried, was being pulled toward him. The forest seemed alive around them, the wind whispering secrets only they could hear. "You cannot hide from what is inside you," Cale said finally, his voice low and final. "Nor can you hide from me. Come with me. Accept the bond, and you will survive. Refuse, and the forest itself will not let you escape." Her mind raced. Escape had always been her plan, her only hope. Yet, as she looked into his golden eyes, she saw not only power and danger, but something she had never seen before: vulnerability. A loneliness that mirrored her own. Her chest tightened, and she realized with both fear and wonder that the bond was not just about him marking her. It was about them intertwined. Before she could answer, the shadows shifted. A cold wind swept through the trees, and the undergrowth rustled violently. Cale's body tensed, and his wolf form began to stir beneath his human exterior. His golden eyes flashed, ears flicking toward sounds Lyra could not hear. "The bond is sealed," he said, his voice almost a whisper now. "Whether you like it or not, you are mine, Lyra!" Her stomach dropped. She felt a physical pull, as if invisible threads bound her to him. She tried to step back, to break free, but her legs betrayed her. Fear mixed with something she could not name, a growing awareness that her life had changed forever. "You cannot run from this," Cale murmured, stepping closer, and the golden glow of his eyes deepened. "I will find you no matter where you go." Lyra's breath caught. She wanted to protest, to fight, to leave, but the bond flared inside her chest like fire, a force beyond her control. The forest around them seemed to grow darker, alive with whispering leaves and shifting shadows. She felt small, fragile, and exposed, but also more alive than she had ever been. I don't want this," she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. Cale's expression softened just slightly, and for the first time his hand reached out, not in aggression, but in an offer of protection. "Neither did I," he admitted, voice low and raw. "But the bond chooses its own path. And now, Lyra, there is no turning back." Lyra wanted to scream, to run, but the forest seemed to pulse with the reality of the truth. She was marked. Her life, her heart, her very essence was bound to this enigmatic, dangerous alpha. And as she looked into his glowing eyes, a strange mixture of fear, longing, and something far deeper began to grow inside her. The wind howled through the trees, carrying the scent of distant danger and unknown trials. The night seemed to stretch endlessly, and Lyra realized that the life she had planned, the quiet life, the invisible life, was gone. Cale's presence pressed against her senses, warm and unyielding, like a tide she could not resist. His wolf, dormant yet alive, stirred within him, responding to the bond that had chosen them both. She felt it in her bones, a resonance that both terrified and fascinated her. "Do you understand?" Cale asked, his voice low, almost intimate, carrying the weight of inevitability. Lyra swallowed hard, her voice caught in her throat. I think so." "Good," he said, stepping back just slightly, though the heat of his presence remained. "Then know this. I will not let anyone harm you. The forest, the clans, even death itself will not separate us. You are mine, and I am yours." "Always." The words echoed in her mind as Cale melted back into the shadows, leaving her trembling, both frightened and inexplicably drawn to the bond she had fought so hard to deny. Lyra sank to the forest floor, her hands pressed against her chest where the pull of the Alpha's mark throbbed like a living thing. The night felt endless, and the mist wrapped around her like a shroud, whispering of destiny she could not escape and power she did not yet understand. She had tried to leave quietly. She had tried to vanish. But the Alpha's wolf had claimed her, and now, no matter how far she ran, her fate was tied to his, and somewhere in the forest, Kale's golden eyes glowed, watching, waiting as the first tendrils of dawn began to break the darkness, and the bond between them deepened with every heartbeat. The next morning, the forest was quiet, yet alive with hidden whispers. Lyra did not sleep. She sat on the damp moss at the edge of a small clearing, her knees drawn to her chest. The mark of the Alpha throbbed faintly on her wrist, a reminder that she could not escape him, no matter how desperately she wished to. Her mind raced with fear and anger. She had spent her life avoiding bonds, avoiding attachments. To be claimed, marked as an Alpha's mate, felt like losing herself before she had truly begun. She pressed her hands against her eyes, trying to block out the memory of Kale's golden gaze. But it was impossible. Even when she closed her eyes, she could feel him watching, waiting, his presence heavy in the air around her. And yet, despite her fear, a small spark of something else stirred in her chest. A strange curiosity. A reluctant wonder at the man who had marked her so completely. She tried to shake it away, but it lingered, like the faint scent of rain on dry earth. The sound of branches snapping made her spin around. Kale emerged from the trees, his figure as commanding as ever. But this time, he did not move with the force of a predator. His steps were calm, measured, as if he were approaching a fragile, dangerous flame. "Lyra," he said softly, his voice cutting through the morning mist. "You cannot stay here alone."
"It is not safe. I can take care of myself," she replied, her tone firmer than she felt.
She stood, brushing moss from her cloak. "I have survived this long without you." "I will survive longer!" Kyle's eyes narrowed slightly, amber fire catching in the light. "You have survived by hiding, running from what you are," he said. "But now the bond will not allow it. You are tied to me, Lyra. And as long as you resist it, it will hurt you more than it hurts me." Lyra swallowed hard. She could feel the truth of his words in her chest, in the tight pull of the mark. Her gift flared faintly, sensing his emotions. Frustration, possessiveness, and something else. A quiet loneliness that gnawed at her heart. I don't understand," she whispered. "Why me? Why this bond?" Kale stepped closer, and she instinctively took a step back. But the forest seemed to shrink around them, drawing them together. "Because the wolf within me chooses its mate with purpose," he said. "You are strong, Lyra. You are rare." "And the bond, it cannot be denied." Lyra looked down at her hands, feeling the faint warmth of the mark. "I don't want to belong to anyone," she said. "I want freedom." Kale's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. "Belonging does not mean losing yourself," he said. "It means having someone who will protect you, who will walk beside you through shadows and light alike. You are not alone anymore. You will not be alone." The words should have comforted her. They should have been a promise. But instead, they made her chest tighten, a mixture of longing and fear twisting inside her. She wanted freedom, but she also wanted safety, warmth, and understanding. The pull between them was confusing, terrifying, and magnetic. "Come with me," Kale said, finally extending his hand. "I will teach you how to live with the bond, how to survive its power and use it. I cannot allow you to wander these woods alone. There are dangers beyond what you can see." Lyra hesitated. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to refuse, to fight for her independence. But the golden fire in his eyes held her in place, and a small, reluctant part of her wanted to trust him. Slowly, almost trembling, she placed her hand in his. The warmth of his touch spread through her like sunlight breaking through clouds. He gave her hand a reassuring squeeze and then led her through the forest, silent except for the soft crunch of leaves beneath their feet. The den was a fortress perched atop a jagged cliff, the stone walls dark against the stormy sky. Lightning flashed in the distance, illuminating the intricate carvings of wolf motifs along the gates. Lyra's breath caught as she approached. The place felt alive, ancient and protective, yet intimidating. Kale guided her inside, and the warmth of the den enveloped her. Wolves padded silently in the shadows, their golden eyes glinting in the dim light. She had never seen creatures so large and powerful. They were not wild, not fully human, yet not fully beast. They were guardians of the Alpha's domain, and their loyalty was absolute. "You are safe here," Kale said, leading her to a small chamber lined with thick furs and soft blankets. "You will not be harmed." Lyra sank onto the furs, her body trembling from exhaustion and fear. She looked at Kale, who remained standing near the doorway, his posture protective but patient. "Why are you... help me?" she asked. Kale's gaze softened. "Because I must," he said simply. "Because the bond demands it. And because I will not let harm come to you. Not while I breathe." The weight of his words pressed on her chest, making it hard to breathe. She wanted to argue, to insist that she did not need anyone. But something in her heart whispered that perhaps she did. Perhaps she had been running not just from Kale, but from the loneliness that had shadowed her life. Days passed in a blur of training and quiet lessons. Kale taught her to sense the subtle movements of the forest, to hear the whispers of creatures in the wind. He showed her how to calm her gift, how to control the emotions that sometimes overwhelmed her. And with each lesson, Lyra felt the pull of the bond growing stronger, deeper, more undeniable. Yet she resisted. Every time she sensed his presence, felt the warmth of his hand, or caught the flicker of concern in his golden eyes, she told herself she would not yield. She was her own person. She would not be claimed even by fate itself. But fate had a way of bending even the strongest will. One evening, under a blood-red moon, Kale led Lyra to the cliffs overlooking the ocean. The wind tore through her hair, cold and wild, carrying the scent of salt and storm. Waves crashed against the rocks below, their roar almost drowning out the silence between them. "You feel it, don't you?" Kale asked, his voice soft, almost vulnerable. Lyra turned to him, startled by the intensity in his gaze. "Feel what?" "The bond," he said simply. "It is alive, Lyra. It moves between us like fire in the dark." By the time they returned to the den, the first rays of dawn were breaking through the storm clouds. Lyra sank to the floor, exhausted, trembling from the raw emotions coursing through her. Kale knelt beside her, his expression soft, almost tender. "You survived the night," he said quietly. "And the bond remains. That is a start." Lyra looked up at him, unsure what to feel. Fear, relief, longing, they all collided inside her. "Why me?" she asked again, voice barely audible. "Because no one else could survive it," Kale said simply. "And because I cannot imagine another by my side." Her chest tightened. The words were dangerous, irresistible, and terrifying. She wanted to deny them, to flee. But deep in her heart, she knew they were true. And as she looked into his golden eyes, she felt the first flicker of a thought she had tried to suppress. Perhaps the bond was not only a prison, but a lifeline. And yet, the shadows of the forest still whispered, promising trials she could not yet see. The bond had been sealed, yes, but it had awakened something older, darker, and more powerful than either of them. Lyra shivered, resting her head against her knees, as Kale's presence loomed nearby, both protective and insistent. She had survived the night. She had survived the bond. But she did not yet know if she could survive what was coming next. The forest had changed. Where once the morning mist had been soft and silent, it now moved like a living thing, curling around the trees and roots with purpose. Shadows stretched unnaturally, reaching toward the path Lyra and Kale walked, whispering secrets she could almost hear but not understand. Every step she took felt heavier, as if the air itself resisted her. Kale walked ahead, confident and steady, yet she sensed tension in his posture. His golden eyes scanned the forest in every direction, muscles coiled like a spring, ready to defend. He was always alert, always watching. And yet, when he glanced back at her, there was something in his gaze that made her stomach tighten. A mixture of care, warning, and unspoken desire. You feel it too, don't you? He asked, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, but low, carrying the weight of command and concern. Lyra nodded, pressing a hand to her chest where the bond burned faintly under her skin. Yes, she whispered. Something is wrong. The forest. It's alive. Kale stopped and turned to her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. It reacts to the bond, he said. The strength between us. It awakens things that have slept for centuries. Spirits, curses, forces older than the clans themselves. Her breath caught. She had always known the world was full of unseen power. But this was more than she had imagined. What kind of forces? Dangerous ones, Kale said. The kind that can sense fear and weakness. The kind that feeds on hesitation and doubt. And now, they know you exist. Lyra swallowed hard. Her gift had always allowed her to sense emotions, but now she felt a new, overwhelming presence, an unseen shadow moving behind the trees, watching, testing, waiting. She wanted to run, to flee as she had before, but the bond held her in place, tethering her to Kale. He noticed her hesitation and stepped closer. I will not let anything harm you, he said softly, but firmly. You must trust me. The forest, the curse, the shadows, they are dangerous, yes, but not stronger than the bond. Not stronger than us, if we face them together. She wanted to feel safe in his presence, to trust that the fire of the bond would protect her, but doubt and fear clawed at her heart. Could she truly rely on someone else? Could she surrender to the bond without losing herself? Kale's hand brushed against hers, deliberate, grounding. Do not fight it, he said. It is not control I seek. The bond is part of you now as much as it is part of me. It will guide us, show us the path if we allow it. The forest seemed to respond to his words, the shadows flickering, whispering as though listening. Lyra shivered and nodded, gripping his hand as they moved forward. They walked deeper into the forest where the trees grew thicker, twisted, and blackened by some unknown corruption. Strange flowers glowed faintly in the darkness, their petals almost translucent, illuminating fleeting glimpses of the shadows that moved between the trunks. This way, Kale murmured, leading her along a narrow, winding path. We must reach the heart of the forest. That is where the curse resides. Only there can it be confronted, and only there can we hope to understand it. Lyra's stomach tightened at his words. What happens if we fail? Kale did not answer immediately. He looked at her, and for a moment his expression softened, almost human, almost vulnerable. Failure is not an option, he said finally. The forest does not forgive, and the bond, it will not allow you to walk away. She swallowed hard. The weight of his words pressed on her chest, heavy and unyielding. She wanted to resist, to turn back, to deny the bond and flee as she had before. But even as she thought it, her body responded, moving forward, tethered by the invisible threads of fate that had tied them together. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the soft rustle of leaves and the distant cries of unknown creatures. Lyra noticed the forest growing colder, the mist denser, as if warning them that they were close to the source of the curse. Her gift flared, revealing glimpses of the past, a shadowed figure, ancient and powerful, watching over the forest, guarding secrets that should never have been disturbed. Kale sensed her unease and placed a hand on her cheek, tilting her face so she met his gaze. Do not be afraid, he whispered. Whatever waits for us, we will face it together. Lyra wanted to believe him. She wanted to feel the strength of the bond, the warmth of his presence, and the promise of protection. But a part of her still trembled with fear. What if the curse was too strong? What if she failed? What if she lost herself entirely to the bond she had fought so hard to resist? As they approached a clearing, the air grew thick and heavy. Shadows danced unnaturally, and the trees seemed to lean closer, their branches like skeletal fingers. In the center of the clearing stood a massive wolf, larger than any Lyra had ever seen. Its fur was black as midnight, eyes glowing red like embers, and its presence radiated power and malice. Cale froze, his hand tightening on her wrist. "The Guardian," he said, voice low. "It senses us, it knows you are bonded. And it will test you." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. She had never seen a creature so terrifying. Yet there was something almost familiar in its gaze, as if it recognized the bond between her and Cale and sought to challenge it. The wolf growled, a deep, resonant sound that shook the ground beneath their feet. Its eyes locked onto Lyra, and she felt her gift flare violently, emotions surging uncontrollably. Fear, anger, longing, and confusion all mingling into a storm that threatened to overwhelm her. Cale stepped in front of her, placing himself between her and the creature. His golden eyes blazed, and the wolf seemed to hesitate, sensing the power of the Alpha's bond. "Do not fear," Cale said, voice firm, carrying authority and reassurance. "The bond is stronger than it thinks. Trust it. Trust us." Lyra closed her eyes, letting the pull of the bond guide her. She felt Cale's strength, his presence, his unspoken promise that he would not let harm come to her. The fear that had threatened to consume her began to ebb, replaced by a strange, fierce clarity. The wolf lunged, its speed blurring in the dim light, but Cale moved with it, intercepting the attack with a graceful, fluid motion. Lyra felt the bond react, a surge of energy flowing between them. She raised her hands instinctively, sending out a pulse of her gift, emotions, feelings, and strength toward the creature. The wolf froze, ears twitching, eyes narrowing. It growled once more, but the bond between Lyra and Cale radiated outward, overwhelming the creature with the combined power of Alpha and Omega. Slowly it lowered its head, acknowledging their strength. Before retreating into the shadows, Lyra sank to her knees, trembling with exhaustion and relief. Cale knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You did well," he said softly, his golden eyes warm and steady. "You controlled it. You faced it. The bond guided you." She looked up at him, chest heaving, tears brimming in her eyes. I was scared," she admitted, "but I felt something too. Something strong, something right." Cale's lips curved into a faint smile. "That is the bond," he said. "It will test you, challenge you, push you to your limits. But it will also protect you, guide you, and give you strength you never knew you had." Lyra took a deep breath, letting the weight of his words sink in. She realized that the fear, the struggle, and the bond were not enemies. They were a path, a way to grow stronger and to survive the darkness that lay ahead. As they rose and continued deeper into the forest, Lyra felt a strange mixture of fear, awe, and something she could not yet name, something that pulled her closer to Cale with every step. The bond was no longer just a mark, no longer just a force of power. It was a connection, a lifeline, and perhaps the beginning of something more. But even as she felt that flicker of hope, the forest whispered its warning. From the shadows, unseen eyes watched, and the ancient curse stirred, sensing the bond and the strength that radiated. It would not rest. It would not forgive. And it would test them further, in ways Lyra and Cale could not yet imagine. She shivered, pressing closer to him as they moved forward. The path was long, the trials uncertain, and the darkness still waited. Yet for the first time, Lyra understood one thing with absolute clarity. She was no longer running. She was facing the bond. She was facing the Alpha, and she was beginning to understand that in the midst of fear and shadows there could also be trust, and perhaps even something like hope. The heart of the forest was silent, yet the silence was alive. The air was thick with power, charged with an energy that made Lyra's skin tingle and her chest tighten. Shadows moved around them like liquid smoke, whispering threats in a language older than words. Somewhere deep inside, she felt it, the ancient curse, awakened by the bond that tied her to Cale. It was watching, waiting, testing them both. Cale moved ahead with quiet confidence, though his golden eyes betrayed alertness and caution. Every sense of his alpha form was stretched to its limits, reading the forest, listening to the heartbeat of the shadows, feeling the pull of the curse that stirred in response to the bond. Lyra followed closely, her own gift flaring as emotions and warnings collided in her mind. Fear, anger, and sorrow flickered like fire in the air. But beneath it all was something stronger, a sense of purpose, of connection, of trust. "We are close," Cale murmured, his voice low, almost a whisper meant for her alone. "The curse lies ahead. Once we confront it, we either survive together or the forest takes us both." Lyra swallowed hard. Her hands were trembling, but the bond burned softly under her skin, a tether of warmth and strength. She took a deep breath. I am ready," she said, her voice small but determined. "I trust you." Cale's eyes softened, the fierce golden glow dimming to a warm light. He reached for her hand, and the simple touch sent a shiver of reassurance through her. "Good," he said. "The bond will guide us, Lyra. Together we are stronger than it knows." They stepped into a clearing where the air seemed heavier, the shadows thicker. In the center, a massive figure coalesced, a wolf made entirely of darkness, its fur like swirling smoke, eyes glowing red like molten embers. It towered over them, muscles rippling under the shadowed form, and it radiated a malevolence that made the forest itself tremble. The curse had taken shape. Lyra's heart raced. Her gift flared, emotions and memories of the forest flooding her mind. She could feel the creature's hunger for fear, its desire to test them, its power drawn from the ancient shadows. She pressed closer to Cale, letting his presence steady her. "You face it now," Cale said softly, voice steady and commanding. "Do not fear. Trust the bond. Trust us." The shadow wolf let out a low growl that shook the clearing. Its gaze locked onto Lyra, and she felt every emotion it exuded. Doubt, despair, anger, loneliness, and hunger. Her body tensed, but she focused on Cale, on the bond, on the warmth and strength that connected them. I am not afraid," she whispered, though her voice trembled. "I trust you. I trust us." The wolf lunged. Its speed was blinding, shadow and smoke flowing like water, but Cale was ready. He stepped in front of her, shifting partially into his wolf form, golden eyes blazing. His presence radiated strength and command, and the bond flared between them like fire. Lyra instinctively raised her hands, sending out a pulse of her empathic gift. She poured her fear, her courage, her determination, and her trust into it, letting the bond guide her. Energy surged outward, intertwining with Cale's power, striking the shadow wolf with a force that made it hesitate. The creature roared, a sound that shook the ground and twisted the shadows around them. It lashed out, but every movement they made was synchronized, bound by the unbreakable thread of the bond. Cale's claws struck, precise and controlled, and Lyra's gift wove around the shadow like a net of light and emotion, constraining it, weakening it. "You are stronger together than it knows," Cale said, his voice carrying through her mind, steady and commanding. "Hold the bond!" "Trust it," Lyra focused, pouring everything into the connection between them. She felt Cale's presence in every nerve, every heartbeat, every flicker of thought. And in that moment, fear and doubt fell away. They were no longer two individuals facing the curse. They were one force, Alpha and Omega, linked in strength, emotion, and purpose. The shadow wolf faltered, its form flickering, weakening under the combined power of their bond. It let out one last deafening roar before dissolving into a swirl of smoke and darkness, leaving the clearing silent once more. Lyra sank to her knees, gasping for breath. Her chest burned from the effort of holding her gift and the bond so strongly. Cale knelt beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder, golden eyes soft but alert. "You did it," he said quietly. "We did it!" She looked up at him, tears brimming in her eyes. "We survived!" she whispered, her voice trembling. Relief, fear, and something deeper mingling inside her. Cale offered a faint smile. "Not just survived," he said. "We prevailed. Together." The forest seemed to sigh in relief, the shadows retreating, the air growing lighter. The storm that had followed them since the bond was sealed lifted, and for the first time, Lyra felt a sense of peace. The curse had been confronted, and the bond had proven stronger than fear, stronger than doubt, stronger than the shadows that had sought to test them. For a long moment they remained kneeling, hand in hand, catching their breath, letting the forest around them settle. Lyra could feel the bond softly pulsing against her skin, a living reminder that she and Cale were no longer separate. They were connected, intertwined, and stronger for it. Cale's gaze softened, the golden fire in his eyes gentle and warm. "Lyra!" he said, his voice low, carrying a weight of emotion she had not heard before. "You have faced fear, doubt, and darkness, and you stood beside me. You are stronger than you know. And I am proud of you." Her chest tightened at his words. Pride, warmth, and a strange, fluttering emotion she could not name mingled inside her. I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted.
"The bond, it guided me. You guided me."
Cale shook his head slightly. "No," he said softly. "We guided each other. That is what the bond is. It is not just a mark or a tie. It is strength, understanding, and trust. And now, Lyra, it is more than that. It is a connection that cannot be broken, even by darkness." The bond pulsed softly between them, a living thread that seemed to hum with approval, as if the forest itself recognized their triumph. Lyra felt a warmth spread through her chest, a sense of belonging and purpose she had never known before. They rose to their feet together, hands still entwined, and began the journey back through the forest. The shadows no longer seemed threatening. The trees no longer leaned like fingers trying to grasp them. The bond had not only defeated the curse, it had transformed the forest, leaving it alive but calm, protective, and serene. As they walked, Cale's hand brushed against hers, gentle, grounding. "We will return to the den soon," he said. "There, you will rest, recover, and begin to learn fully how to live with the bond. It will guide you, but you must also learn to trust yourself." "That is the next step." Lyra nodded, feeling the exhaustion of the past days and nights weigh on her, but also feeling something new, a sense of hope, of purpose, of strength she had never imagined. I think I can," she said quietly. Cale's golden eyes softened further. "You can," he said, "and I will be there with you, always. The bond, it will never let us be apart." They reached the edge of the forest as the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon. Light spilled across the trees, illuminating the path ahead. Lyra felt the warmth of the sun on her skin, the cool breeze of the morning, and the undeniable pulse of the bond connecting her to Cale. It was no longer a tether of fear, but a lifeline of trust, strength, and something far deeper. Love, perhaps, though neither of them had spoken the word aloud. Cale stopped and turned to her, eyes glinting softly in the dawn light. "Lyra," he said, voice low but certain, "the trials are over, for now. But remember this, the bond is not just power. It is protection, it is trust, and it is connection. And above all, it is ours, forever." Lyra felt her chest tighten, tears welling in her eyes. She nodded, unable to speak, letting the words, the promise, and the bond wash over her. She realized now that the fear she had carried for so long, the fear of losing herself, of being claimed, of being trapped, had been replaced with something she had never thought possible: acceptance, trust, and a quiet, fierce joy at the connection she shared with Cale. Cale stepped closer, the golden warmth of his presence surrounding her, his hand brushing against hers once more. "Are you ready?" he asked. Lyra took a deep breath, feeling the bond pulse softly under her skin, steady and sure. "Yes," she said, her voice quiet but full of determination. "I am ready." Together they stepped forward, leaving the dark forest behind, carrying the strength of the bond, the triumph over the curse, and the promise of a future shaped not by fear, but by trust, connection, and something far deeper that neither of them fully understood yet, but both were willing to explore. The forest was silent once more, the shadows retreating into the distant trees, leaving only the light of dawn and the bond between Alpha and Omega, unbreakable and eternal. And somewhere, in the quiet of the world, the first whispers of peace stirred. The world had shifted, and Lyra and Kale had changed with it. They had faced the darkness together, survived, and emerged stronger, bound not by fear but by trust, courage, and a connection that would endure through any shadow yet to come.